Malawi is one of the least developed countries in the southern part of Africa. Over time, the country has experienced an increase in the frequency and intensity of climatic events such as droughts and floods. The extreme weather events, including prolonged dry spells and floods, have perpetually brought misery to farmers, most of whom rely on rain-fed agriculture. Mid-January 2022, Malawi received a lot of rains, which were induced by Tropical Storm Anna. The heavy rains triggered floods which caused devastation in most areas. To confirm the intensity of the rains, the Department of Climate Change and Meteorological Services reported that Blantyre alone received over 250 millimeters of rainfall in 24 hours, which was enough to cover for the whole month. The Department of Disaster Management Affairs, DODMA, confirmed that 16 districts and 2 cities, mostly in the south, central and east, were affected by the storm. Days later, most villages in the lower Shire were swallowed by the violent waters, damaging crops, houses, livestock, roads and other critical infrastructure. The disaster choked delivery of critical services, including power supply. On February 15th, DODMA released a situation report detailing the deaths of 46 people and the disappearance of 18, the displacement of over 32,000 people, and the impact on over 220,000 households. On 26th January, Malawi President Dr. Lazarus Chakwera declared disaster area or parts that were affected by the flood. More than 170 camps were set up to house those displaced by the floods weeks after they wreaked havoc on villages. However, the living conditions in these camps are not ideal, and they expose Malawi's rising poverty and inequalities. Hundreds were in need of food assistance, but supplies were not adequate. In Insanje's Bitirinyu camp, each family received 2 cups of maize flour on this particular day. The rest of the food, including relish and cooking, is up to them.
Vuda ndinjala ine ndine mzade mwana ndabega mumucha ndabwane mwana mmanja bakana vanhu chakuja tibi tukoyembekeza kakuboji pakada nsiku.
In the area of traditional authority Ngowe of Chikwawa district, Tropical Storm Anna was the second disaster to handle in a space of 10 days. More than 3,000 people had already been displaced by the heavy storm that hit the area on January 14th. During the second disaster, the camp's population was more than doubled. Here, they don't have adequate sanitary facilities, some learners have been forced out of school, and every day the displaced families go to sleep with no hope. It's a double crisis for those that have lost their loved ones.
Taluza mioyo kwana anthu atatu, akazi awiri ndi mwana mmodzi amene ngalawa ina gubuduka anthu nasowa. Komanso kunapitanso ngalawa imene ndi anthu 7 amene anapulumuka munthu mmodzi, koma onse 6 sadapezeke mpaka pano. Kuteko pano chiopsezo imene chilipo kuno kwa Ngowe ndi chimenecho.
This year's flooding has been described as more deadly by locals because the floodwaters reached places usually considered to be safe.
Madzi akukwera ngawa imakwera. Madzi akukwera ngawa imakwera. Imanga mwamba ndithu nyumbamo. Taona kuti mafuti ngakhale kumamawa adagundikira kuti asasiye yani. Dalimba mtima ndithu wesesa kuchova mapita cheni doko cheni distance ya minda kumasanduku. Mene kudathera chiphediphedi lichoka ndimba masanduku 2. Afika mbaunda mwa cheni mwa masanduku.
The 2015 and 2019 Cyclone Idai floods devastated Chikuse Livingston's village in Masanduko, but he refused to leave his home. This year, he had no choice but to flee in order to save his life.
Padalibe chance yochita njira inayi. Anandiononga ndithu. Fika size mene zimandilimbikisa kuti ndikhaena zimene monga nzimbe. Basi zaonongekerako. Ndikuopsaso kumene aphera anthu mmenemo. Ndima maendedwe athu anali otani angozi ovuta sanitengera kuti basi sizone chakachi chimene ndabweramo pange chisanzo yoti basi chakachi chimene chokako angogwisa ntchito malimidwe okha basi ungoyenda sizone.
Many residents of Masanduko are still trying to come to terms with their losses. Martinez Longwe stays in Ingabo area, but every farming season she relocates to this village where her sister used to live. On the night of February 24th, Martinez lost her sister while attempting to cross the swollen Mtayakasu River on their way back from a community meeting where they went to register names under the social cash transfer. In the midst of the storm, her best friend was washed away. A small branch of the tree helped Martinez stay alive. A thorough investigation has turned up nothing.
Ndikapeza mai wonditulusa kumwamba ndi pamene ndikangoti mai majinda mwakamodzi choncho andibiza kena akundiyimika kuti ndiponde pansi kulephera ndakafika pena apa kundidzusa kumwamba basi kundiponya ina mai majindamwa nditafika katikati wa msinje njanga pa mai uja sidantaniso sidamveso yayi madangoti mozi anthu kumva uthengawo kupita kafunafuna osapeza. Pa 26 kwafunafuna usapeza nangopeza nsalu yokha. Pa 27 kwafunafuna usapeza ndeye mpaka pa 28 achimwene mpaka kuba kusanja anthu apita.
Zomba was not spared from the damaging Anna Tianjane irrigation scheme in the area of Group Village Headman Chaweza was partly damaged. Some of the trees on the riverbanks and crops such as maize, bananas were washed away in the storm. Gerard Kamweruze, a representative of the community, said since the Napolo disaster in 1985, they have never had a major disaster. In spite of this, the river gets wider every year. It got worse this year, taking up nearly 20 meters of their farmland along the irrigation scheme's boundaries.
Kumapeto kwa scheme yathuyi tinazalako mitengo komanso nthochi ndi sungwi. Choncho kufika kwa madzi amene mchaka chinochi atichosera nthochi zimenezi, mitengo komanso sungwi zimene tinazala. Zimene zikuonesa kuti mtsinjewu ukubwera ndi madzi ochuluka kwambiri amene tikulephera kuti mwake tikhoza kuwatetezera chifukwa timembeza kuti kazala mitengo sungwi ndi nthochi ndikuti msinje wathu tiutetezera. Koma chifukwa cha madzi amene amabwera zikuoneka kuti zakanika kuti tiutetezere. Ndizoona kuti pamene madzi akubwera akumatha kumagumula msinjewu kumachoka kumene kupi umayenda msaka zonse kapena mmene unapangidwira ukumabwera nuyo chambali ya kumene lili kuno monga mmene mukuoneramu khoma limene lili ndoti lachita kugumuka kupita uko. Choncho zikuonesa kuti no malo athu olima akumakhala kumachepabe chifukwa cha msinje umenewu.
Kamweruze claims that a dike they have been constructing helped prevent flood waters from wiping out crops and encroaching on nearby villages. He is optimistic such locally hatched solutions will continue helping the community withstand disasters like these in the future. People in this situation have very limited access to healthcare. In these camps, no COVID-19 protocols are followed. 19 people can fit in this small tent. A special team from the Zomba District Health Office was spotted conducting mobile clinics. At the camp in MALAWI village, Losta Chimera, 45, is one of the residents. Neither her house nor her crops were spared from the damage. She is concerned about the current situation, but there is no quick way out for her.
Ndi mavuto amene alibwa amatenda amene ali pakati pano. Sizaona kuti tikakhala anthu ambiri panopa. Tikukupemphani kuti mwina ngati kuti kotheka mutithandize tibwerere makwathu. Chifukwa kukhala kwako thinana ndi upweya alese apume nzosachita bwino. Tikukupemphani kuti mutithandize. Mwina mutitumizira zoti zikatithandize tikamange ana manyumba pa makomo atumbuka ndi mapepala zilibe kanthu. Tikamange kuti tikatithawepo pano. Monga mkuziwa myezi ino imakhala yovuta. Kusowa chokudya. Pena paja azathu akathandizidwa limene tikuthandizidwa akathandizidwa wina basi iwe bwera pano tizadye tikumadya nawo. Iwina wakapeza wina bwera pano tizadye tikumadya nawo. Movuta oti tili pa mavuto kwambiri.
Balaka district perpetually experiences drought. This year, farmers, especially those close to Shire River, had a rude awakening when the river flooded, sweeping away all their crops. This area was completely covered in green maize. However, heavy erosion has brought in large amounts of sand. Farmers have to dig deep to find good soil in order to replant. Esther Malemba is one of the farmers still tallying up the damage, and her home was also heavily hit.
Malo ano timalima chimanga kuyambira kalekale iminda yathu ndithu nde timazala chimanga na ndolo nyembaso tikafuna timazala muno nteza timazala basi unangochitika kungobwera madzi osefukira kuti ani kuti kokololera mbewu zathu zonsezo kuteko panopo tibe pogwira tilibe tikudandaula panopo kuteko tatenga makasi lotufuate zikumba munchengamo koma kuti tipeze dotira pasi ndipovuta kwambiri.
There's never been a disaster of this magnitude in Malemba's life before.
Ine kubadoka ine sinazione. Kwa maza mangodusa sanambe wasefukira kunoko ayi. Kuyamba kuona ndi panopo.
Pumps for a nearby Chingere solar irrigation scheme were also submerged. Chairperson of the scheme, Nyadani Sawirengera, is concerned that over 53,000 households that are part of the program will go hungry. Last year alone, the group made over 2.5 million kwacha.
So nadi zovuta satipesadi aba nali tsiku limene linali pa 23 January tsiku limene kudayamba mvula ndipo mvula imeneyi inagwa kwa maola 24 ndipo potha pa maola 24 amenewa tinabwera kuno monga kumene timagwira kuntchito monga ku scheme tidaona madzi mmene amalekeza afikamo ndipo titagona mawa ache pa 25 tinazabwera kuno pamene tinapeza kuti madzi alipena palipose ndipo madzi amenewa adakalowa mpampu imene pampu yonse kuchokera pasi mpaka pamwamba ndapeza kuti madzi ajatani adzadza.
Catholic Development Commission CADECOM has been collaborating with partner organizations in order to build community resilience in the targeted areas of the Climate Change Program CCPM. After the recent storm, CADECOM Program Coordinator Aaron Mtaya fears that some of the gains made will be lost. He was relieved, however, that early warning systems and other measures had helped to mitigate the damage in some places.
We are talking of the early warning system, that indeed we had several trainings on how communities can indeed prepare themselves and also how they can act before the disaster hit. In some areas where indeed they were getting rid of those messages from the VCPCs and some stakeholders, they had the time to rescue their properties and also their lives, and they had to move to some areas which are not exposed to disasters. And in some areas where we would also train them on how they can engage different stakeholders and also maybe put up some embankments where which can protect them from flooding waters. They had done that, and indeed we can say the impact is quite lessened as comparing to the time back. So we are saying in those areas, floods did not even get to their homes, but only their crops were affected. And in also some areas where we're telling people indeed to to give space, not to interfere with the river banks. Indeed, they have been protected. Yeah, we are saying that their fields were protected. They were not even hit by these floods.
Mtaya says this is yet another reason why global leaders must speed up climate negotiations and deliver on their promises. He also thinks it's time for the Malawi government to pass a disaster risk management bill that has been in draft form for nearly 8 years. It is expected that the law will facilitate the relocation of residents from disaster zones and the establishment of a disaster risk management fund.
It's quite worrisome that indeed we are still talking about the draft form of disaster risk management bill, a bill that was developed just to to help someone in the rural communities. And today we are talking of people losing lives, something that we could prevent if you had this form enacted. And we feel like the president and the members of the parliament should really take it serious today, that indeed it's their responsibility to act swiftly. If you have this bill in place, we know that indeed some lives will be saved.
Parties at COP26 in Glasgow emphasized the need for industrialized countries that have caused climate change to pay for losses and damage, to deliver on several financial commitments.
We must answer them with the immediate disbursement of the money pledged to least developed countries by developed nations, which is not a donation, but a cleaning fee. We must answer them by the urgent loosening of the debt that strangles climate change adaptation efforts in vulnerable regions like SADC.
Malawi is also part of the global community implementing the 2015-2030 Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Among the framework's 7 priorities are fewer deaths from disasters, fewer people affected, less economic damage from disasters, and less disruption of critical services from disasters. Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and head of UNDRR, Mami Mizutori, wants Malawi to integrate DRR interventions across all levels in government.
Malawi, I know that they are focusing a lot on disaster risk reduction. We have had good conversations with the government. And we do think that a country like Malawi needs to put, again, more financing into disaster risk reduction, into prevention. They need to make disaster risk reduction policy all of a government, all of a society attempt. The government should lead the process, but they should also bring in all other partners, including local governments, including civil society, including the media, because as the Sendai Framework says, risk is everyone's business, and secondary framework can only be achieved through a whole of society approach.
Climate change's ugly face is only getting worse, especially in places like Malawi, where the population has a limited ability to adapt to extreme weather events.